Shawn Waltman joined the WWF when the company were just about to go full throttle with their new generation movement, and the 1-2-3 Kid would become one of the few new wrestlers who actually got over during this time period. From mid-1993 right up until Shawn's first departure in 1996, the company would create some of the most absurd and ridiculous characters known to man, and business took a hit during this same era, but Waltman was able to make a name for himself during these trying times for both the wrestling business and wrestling fans around the world. It was the story of the underdog that got Waltman over to begin with, but within a year or so, the Kid became the measuring stick. Scott Hall said that WWF newcomers would work with Waltman, and it was Shawn who reported back if these newcomers were good enough to hang with the superstars of the WWF, and that really tells us a lot about Waltman's abilities in the ring. Today's video will look at Shawn's entire run as the 1-2-3 Kid in the WWF. Shawn Waltman was trained by the great Boris Malenko, his son Joe, and he received further training from Eddie Sharkey and Karl Gotch. So this gives us a great idea as to why Waltman was so proficient in the ring. The first recorded match we have for Shawn was back in 1990 where he won the PWA Light Heavyweight title. I'm pretty sure this isn't Shawn's first professional match, but yeah, his recorded bouts start off with a title win. Waltman stayed in the PWA for around a year, ending his run with a few matches against Jerry Lynn, one of which has survived and is currently available on YouTube right now. Shawn would then travel to Dallas, Texas to work with the Global Wrestling Federation, and in mid-1991, Shawn would win the GWF Light Heavyweight title only to drop it again to Jerry Lynn in December the same year. This was a 2 out of 3 falls match, and the whole thing has been uploaded to the WWE Network in excellent quality, and it even features an interview with Lynn afterwards conducted by none other than Bruce Pritchard. The match itself is superb, and even though I'd seen this one previously, I ended up watching the whole thing again while scripting this video, so do make sure to check this one out when you get a chance. Following this contest, both Waltman and Lynn travelled to Japan where they worked with and against each other before returning to the States in mid-1992. And upon his return, the Lightning Kid got a tryout match with WCW against Bob Cook at Center Stage in Atlanta, and to my knowledge, this match has never seen the light of day. Things mustn't have gone too well, or maybe it was always just a one and done deal, because Waltman would find himself again in Japan while also working a few small independent dates around America. Towards the end of the year though, tragedy struck when Shawn worked a match for Larry Sharp's World Wrestling Association against a wrestler named Billy Wilcox. Wilcox overshot a front flip dive from the top rope to the outside, and Waltman ended up cracking his head on the concrete floor. This resulted in a blood clot forming near Shawn's brain, and Waltman was told to give up wrestling by doctors. Only 4 months later, the Kid was back on the road, teaming up once again with Jerry Lynn. Shawn had his tryout match with the World Wrestling Federation the day after WrestleMania 9, where he worked against another WWF hopeful, Louis Spicolli. The two men worked against each other twice before Shawn travelled back home to Minneapolis to take on Sabu in an NWA promoted event. This match has also somehow survived and it's available on YouTube. The Kid does a fantastic blade job during this contest, and Jerry Lynn has to make the save. 9 days after this pretty graphic matchup with Sabu, the Kid made his official WWF debut, losing to Doink on Monday Night Raw in around 2 minutes. And really, nobody cared all that much for Waltman, now renamed the Kamikaze Kid. The following month, Mr. Hughes defeated Waltman, now known as the Cannonball Kid, and it really looked like the Kid was going to be another one of the many job guys that the World Wrestling Federation hired at the time, who would do nothing but lose to the bigger stars of the company. The week after the Hughes match though, the Kid shocked WWF audiences when he got a win over one of the promotion's biggest stars, the bad guy, Razor Ramon. The Kid vs Razor Ramon match that took place on the May 17th, 1993 episode of Monday Night Raw pretty much made Shawn Waltman a star overnight. After the humiliating losses to Doink and Mr. Hughes, the Kid came across as a nobody, someone who was there to take a beating and nothing more. Razor completely decimated the Kid throughout their match, taking great pleasure in hurting this poor newcomer, but Kid shocked everyone by hitting a moonsault and actually scoring a pinfall win. Nobody saw it coming. Enhancement guys just didn't win matches back then, but it happened here on Raw and the fans loved it. The bad guy would call the win a total fluke, but fans enjoyed rubbing it in Ramon's face by chanting 1, 2, 3 during his promos, and this is how the name 1, 2, 3 Kid came to be. Razor Ramon wanted revenge, so the bad guy would try to entice the Kid into having a rematch. Kid turned down $2,500 and later $5,000 to step into the ring with the bad guy, but he couldn't turn down the offer of $10,000 for just one more match with Razor Ramon. During this contest, the Kid decided he couldn't win the match, so he instead stole the money and he ran out of the arena. This whole story served two purposes. It would turn Razor Ramon babyface when the bad guy got ridiculed by Ted DiBiase and IRS, and it would also make the Kid an unlikely underdog who now had a regular spot in the World Wrestling Federation. On the July 19th, 1993 episode of Monday Night Raw, Money Inc. offered Razor Ramon a job cleaning their toilets and doing other degrading things, but Razor said he doesn't have a price. He isn't interested in working for DiBiase and Shyster. Ramon took out Money Incorporated, and DiBiase said he'll do what Ramon couldn't do, beat the 1, 2, 3 Kid. The match pitting the Kid vs DiBiase took place on the August 16th episode of Raw, and Kid ended up getting a DQ victory after IRS got involved. All of this led to Razor Ramon facing Ted DiBiase at SummerSlam 93 in what would turn out to be the $1 Million Man's final WWF match, and it also led to the 1, 2, 3 Kid facing IRS in Shawn Waltman's WWF pay-per-view debut. Razor got the win, but the Kid wasn't so fortunate. Erwin R. Shyster was able to defeat the Kid, but win, lose or draw, the 1, 2, 3 Kid was now on pay-per-view, something nobody could have imagined after his first few losses within the WWF. The Kid went on quite the winning streak following SummerSlam on both the live events and WWF TV shows. He and Razor Ramon became friends both on-screen and off-screen, and around this same time period, Big Daddy Cool Diesel would also make his WWF debut, who in turn became good personal friends with Shawn Michaels. All four men would become known as the Kliq, a group of buddies who looked after each other's best interests backstage, and a group that had more stroke than what most other people were comfortable with. Down the line, Hunter Hearst Helmsley would also join the group, but throughout 1994 it was just Diesel, Shawn, Razor and Kid. It was also Kid who introduced the wrestling world to the Turkish Wolf hand gesture after seeing it in a bar during a European tour. Some guys were doing it and Waltman thought it looked pretty cool. He asked the guys what it symbolised and the Kliq just ran with it. So guys like Finn Balor, Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, the Bullet Club and the countless other wrestling superstars who do that hand gesture have Shawn Waltman to thank for it. It wasn't just about hanging out with these main event guys and getting a rub thanks to your friends though. Waltman could back it up in the ring, and if you need further proof, look no further than the 1, 2, 3 Kid vs Bret Hart match on the July 11th 1994 edition of Raw, a match that's considered as one of the all-time greatest matches in Raw history. Before looking at the Hart vs Kid match, I should briefly mention that Waltman won his very first WWF Championship at the beginning of 1994, teaming up with Marty Jannetty to win the tag team titles from the Quebecers. Jannetty and Kid held the belts for around a month, and they ended up dropping the titles back to the Quebecers during a Madison Square Garden house show. Kid continued winning matches on TV though, and he earned himself a WWF title shot against Bret the Hitman Hart. And what's so unique about this contest is that it went on for nearly 18 minutes. A match of this length didn't happen on Monday Night Raw during this era, but it did here and it seriously paid off. Hart vs. Kidd in 1994 turned out to be a shining example of what the new generation was supposed to be about. Athletic guys putting on exciting matches that the superstars of the past simply couldn't do. Bret Hart wasn't selfish in the ring either. It would be easy for a big name superstar to give very little to someone like Shawn Waltman, but the 1-2-3 Kid was Bret Hart's equal during this title match. The Hitman allowed Waltman to get his stuff in, and even though he lost, the Kid left Raw that evening looking like one of the absolute best wrestlers in the world. The Hitman had put Waltman over even though Bret still won the match. To this day, Shawn Waltman remains extremely grateful to Bret Hart for what the Hitman done on this night, and the Kid calls this the very best match of his entire career. Waltman said, "He got really aggressive with me in there for the sole purpose of making sure the people were behind me. Because, people were always solidly behind me back then, but I'd never been up against Bret. In the end, he raised my hand and hugged me. It was like, man, that boosted my stock and put me straight to the top." That was what we did after the first time we ever had a match. That's what came of it. So I can't imagine if we really got to know each other in the ring, what could have happened. During the match, Bret gets a pinfall win, but Waltman's foot was on the rope. Bret demands that the match gets restarted in order to get a fair winner, and it's after the restart where fans seriously start getting behind the Kid. Waltman shows a lot of fire, but Bret catches Kid and the sharpshooter gets applied. The 1-2-3 Kid has no other choice but to tap out. After the match, the two men get a standing ovation. Even Jim Ross and Randy Savage get on their feet to applaud what they just saw. And after hugging Waltman, Bret raises the Kid's arm in the air as the audience gives it up for one of the most exciting matches in Raw history. If you're going to go back and watch this one, make sure you leave the audio on. Jim Ross's commentary is also excellent on this evening, and he does a fantastic job of putting the match over. The 1-2-3 Kid would get a DQ victory over Bret's brother Owen the following month on Raw, but from here, Waltman was unfortunately shuffled back into the WWF mid-card. He did win the tag team titles once again at the beginning of 1995, teaming up with Bob Holly during a tag team title tournament that ended with Holly and Kid defeating Tatanka and Bam Bam Bigelow of the $1 Million Corporation. Kid and Holly were put into this tournament as replacements for the Smoking Guns. It was reported that Bart Gunn was injured around this time period, and so the Smoking Guns would get a tag team title opportunity the very next night on Raw, a match that Billy and Bart won. So Kid and Holly only held the belts for around 24 hours or so, but it's probably for the best. It's hard to think of any positives with Holly and Waltman becoming a long-term tag team. Throughout this whole time period though, the 1-2-3 Kid and Razor Ramon remained on-screen friends. Razor began a rivalry with Jeff Jarrett and his roadie, and Waltman was used to even the odds a little bit. WrestleMania 11 saw the Kid stand in Razor's corner during an IC title match pitting the bad guy against Double J, and a few months later at the second In Your House event, the roadie would end up scoring a victory over the Kid. The Kid took a piledriver from the second rope during this matchup. The losses kept coming at the 1995 SummerSlam event when the 1-2-3 Kid was defeated by Hakushi, but this one comes recommended also. The styles of Hakushi and the Kid meshed really well together, and this one turned out to be one of the best matches of the whole SummerSlam 95 card. One thing was becoming apparent though: any hopes of singles title shots seemed to be completely out the window when it came to the 1-2-3 Kid. Those opportunities seemed to be reserved for Waltman's Kliq buddies like Shawn, Diesel and Razor. Still, SummerSlam 1995 isn't the greatest pay-per-view in the world, but check out Hakushi vs the 1-2-3 Kid. So good was this match that the WWF decided to book it again twice on Monday Night Raw, only the Kid was able to defeat his opponent on both occasions. Realising that the underdog story was getting a little played out and realising a change needed to be made to keep things fresh, the 1-2-3 Kid would begin a slow heel turn that began on the 11th of September 1995 edition of Monday Night Raw. Razor Ramon was booked into a match with the British Bulldog, and because Dean Douglas got involved in the match, the Kid decided to come out and help the bad guy. The Kid inadvertently splashed Razor, and after the bout, the bad guy and the 1-2-3 Kid had a few words for each other. This all led to the Kid wanting to prove himself to the bad guy and wanting to gain Razor's respect, and a match was booked between the two men the following week on Raw. Because of Dean Douglas's interference, the 1-2-3 Kid was once again able to defeat Razor Ramon. At In Your House 3, Razor Ramon had a match with Douglas and the referee got knocked out. For some reason, the Kid ran down to the ring and he made the 3 count, which led to Razor thinking he won the match. When Ramon realised what happened, he pushed Kid out of the ring and this allowed Douglas to roll up the bad guy and score the victory. Ramon and Kid then slapped each other around a bit before officials came down to break it up. Another Razor vs Kid match was booked then on the October 2nd edition of Raw, and even though Ramon gave Waltman a complete beating, the bad guy still appreciated how Kid tried to take shortcuts to win the match. It ended with Ramon getting the win and both guys showing that they actually respected each other. We were led to believe that this mini rivalry had now ended and everything was back to normal, and Razor and the Kid teamed up at In Your House 4 to take on the Smoking Guns for the tag team titles. Razor had the match won, all he needed to do was pin Billy Gunn, but the Kid wanted tagged in order to score the victory. The Kid lazily pinned Billy, but the pin got reversed, the Smoking Guns win the match, and the 1-2-3 Kid just threw away the tag team titles. Embarrassed by what just happened, the 1-2-3 Kid attacked the Smoking Guns after the bout, and he grabbed the tag team belts. Razor Ramon came back into the ring and he handed the belts back to Billy and Bart. The full heel turn happened then on the November 13th, 1995 episode of Raw, when the Kid was the special guest referee for a match pitting Psycho Sid against Razor Ramon. Kid pulled Sid down from a Razor's Edge attempt and he performed a fast count when Sid pinned Razor. The 1-2-3 Kid had sold out. He was now part of the $1 Million Corporation, and the Kid would remain a heel during the rest of this WWF run. The heel 1-2-3 Kid didn't exactly set the world on fire, and it didn't really improve Waltman's position on the cards either. If anything, he just became like every other bad guy in Ted DiBiase's faction, where everyone more or less had the same motives. The Kid and Psycho Sid would begin feuding with Razor Ramon and his new friend Marty Jannetty, and this wouldn't last very long. The rivalry made it to In Your House 5, where Razor and Jannetty won a tag team match against the heels. Kid would then enter the 1996 Royal Rumble before finally meeting Razor Ramon again inside the ring. This time it was on pay-per-view, and it took place in the Louisville Gardens at In Your House 6. This one was booked as a crybaby match, and it's incredible that the WWF didn't want to try and book a real heat-filled matchup between these two, considering the history that they had together. Instead, the crybaby match took place, and the loser would be put in a diaper and fed an oversized baby's bottle. Nobody really cared, and I really think that both men deserved a little better than this right here. Waltman was able to have another good match though the very next night on Raw when he battled Shawn Michaels in a losing effort, but really this would be the last decent thing the Kid would do during this time period within the World Wrestling Federation. Both Razor and Kid were also left off the WrestleMania 12 card, and Scott Hall and Kevin Nash had agreed to jump ship to Ted Turner's WCW organisation, so Waltman was really just left as another $1 Million Corporation lackey who, to be fair, still put on good performances, but he simply was not going to move up the cards. Shawn was also going in and out of rehab around this time period also, so his future within the WWF was looking pretty bleak. Shawn would end up having his final WWF match of 1996 on May 20th, losing to Savio Vega on Monday Night Raw. Shawn managed to get himself a WCW contract, and the 1-2-3 Kid would leave the World Wrestling Federation to join his friends Scott Hall and Kevin Nash in the New World Order. Waltman did not receive the same big money deals that Hall and Nash did, but that really didn't matter. He was now on the show that had more viewers, and he was also part of the biggest storyline and faction in wrestling. Now wrestling as Syxx, Shawn Waltman was able to have some incredible matches in World Championship Wrestling against the likes of Dean Malenko, Ric Flair, and of course Eddie Guerrero, with their match at NWO Sold Out being the one that everyone talks about. When Waltman eventually returned to the World Wrestling Federation in 1998 though, it can be easily argued that his X-Pac run during the Attitude Era was much better than his 1-2-3 Kid run, although I don't think anything will come close to his match with the Hitman Bret Hart in '94. I've already covered Syxx on the channel in depth, and I'm going to cover X-Pac again too, mainly because I'm not happy with the older videos on the channel, including the original X-Pac video, so you can consider the early videos as very brief overviews. Still, when it comes to the 1-2-3 Kid and Waltman's WWF debut in 1993, it's incredible what can happen with some careful booking. The Kid defeating Razor Ramon in '93 was well thought out. You had Razor and Money Inc. in the background making sure the fans reacted in the way that was planned, and the WWF managed to create a new star out of someone who was seemingly there to take loss after loss. It's a shame more wasn't done with Waltman following the Bret Hart match, but I really don't think Shawn would complain too much about how his career turned out in the end. Being part of both the NWO and Degeneration X is quite a big deal when you consider how important both factions would become to the history of pro wrestling. I hope you enjoyed this video, thank you very much for watching, and take care.
If you really wanna party with me, let me see just what you got for me. Put all your hands where my eyes can see. Straight buck wildin' in the place to be. If you really wanna party with me, let me see just what you got for me. Put all your hands where my eyes can see. Straight buck wildin' in the place to be. If you really wanna party with me, let me see just what you got for me. Put all your hands where my eyes can see. Straight buck wildin' in the place to be. If you really wanna party with me, let me see just what you got for me. Put all your hands where my eyes